Yes, absolutely no doubt about it now.
Is it possible that these massive civilizations were also advanced, and through the use of pharmacology, the same way we understand how to synthesize DMT and synthesize various psychedelic drugs, that's how they learned?
Yes, it's perfectly possible that there is science in the hunter-gatherer mode of life, and that they applied that science. The Amazon is not entirely a natural product. The Amazon is a human-made garden. The trees in the Amazon that produce food are hyper-dominant. That didn't happen by accident. That happened because human beings made that happen. They created this incredible, we still don't understand it fully today, the terra preta, the black earth, which is immensely fertile, which reproduces its own fertility through bacteria in the soil. There are still patches of terra preta all over the Amazon, and settlers in the Amazon seek them out to plant in. Again, this is evidence of science. There were cities in the Amazon. Populations of 100,000 or more have been now revealed in the Amazon. It was a completely different from what we imagine it to be. And it used to be 7 million square kilometers. About 2 million square kilometers have been cut down by our rapacious, short-sighted, idiotic civilization. But 5 million square kilometers are left, and we're just beginning to get a hint of what's underneath them as a result of LiDAR. This technique like light imaging and detection ranging, which flies. You can fly a plane over a section of rainforest, and without damaging anything, you can see what's underneath that rainforest. And what's underneath it is gigantic geometrical structures, huge squares, circles, a circle surrounded by a square, just enormous constructions that you would not expect to find hunter-gatherer civilizations having made, and yet there they are in the Amazon. I've had occasion to this is one of the recent sciences on this. I've had occasion to meet a few billionaires, and I've tried to say to them, if you want to do some good with your money, put it into a major LiDAR survey of the Amazon, because right now only a tiny section of the state of Acre in Brazil has been surveyed by LiDAR, and what's come out of there, they're even finding pyramids in the middle of the Amazon. And then once they're found, archaeologists can go to them and have a look at them. Put some money into a proper LiDAR survey of the entire Amazon, and our whole idea of the past of the human species may change. And that comes back to my point. 5 million square kilometers in the Amazon, hardly studied. 27 million square kilometers of submerged continental shelves, hardly studied. 9 million square kilometers of the Sahara Desert, hardly studied. And yet archaeology claims to know the whole story of our past. Ridiculous. They can't know the whole story of the past while so little of the planet remains, so much of the planet remains untouched by archaeology. And why does it remain untouched? Well, partly it's very expensive to go do archaeology in the Sahara or in the Amazon, and partly because archaeologists are convinced that they're not going to find anything there. Well, LiDAR is breaking that myth. It's showing us that there is something to find in the Amazon. And I would urge any good-hearted billionaire who wants to see some real changes in our understanding of the past to put some money into LiDAR surveys. I know a number of the archaeologists who are doing this, a guy called Marty Partinson, for example. Very, very, very important work, but they're doing it on tiny funds. They need more funding in order to survey the whole Amazon. And I think if the whole Amazon is surveyed, it's going to radically change the way we view our past.
One of the problems is that both in archaeology and geology is the focus on a very limited, specialized site. You will have archaeologists that will spend a decade excavating one site, and obviously they're going to know more about that site than anybody, far and away. What seems to be lacking, and the same with geologists, you'll have geologists that will spend years examining one site, one geological outcrop, determining the lithologies, the petrology, the sedimentary sequence, the ages, and they can tell you all about that site. What's missing, though, is the big picture, the integrating these different parts and these sites. And really, this is where there's room for those who are not super specialized to come in and try to come up with some kind of a coherent model that can link these sites together into a big picture, the panorama, the grander panorama. I'm thinking of the Al Goodyear Down at tell
Down
us,
at Topper.
Tell
Down at-
tell
down
tell
at-
a little
down-
bit about
down at
Al
Topper.
and what he
Well,
told
Al
us.
Al is an archaeologist, and he was, for a long time, there was a dogma in archaeology, a true dogma, that there were no human beings in the Americas until 13,000 years ago. Let's say 13,400 years ago. And they called them the Clovis culture. And the dogma was called Clovis first, that there were just no human beings here before Clovis. And Al was excavating a site called Topper, looking for Clovis materials, but then he did what other archaeologists didn't do. They dug below the Clovis layer. And below the Clovis layer...
People kept asking him, well, what's below it?
What's below it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And when he dug below it, he found evidence, more evidence of humans, going back tens of thousands of years before Clovis, going back 50,000 years. Like so many archaeologists who've broken the mold and found evidence that confronted the dogma, he was shunned by his colleague.
What was this evidence that he discovered?
Evidence of human presence in the Americas.
Artifacts.
Objects, 50,000 years ago. I'm not saying artifacts of a high civilization. I'm just saying evidence that humans were here.
Yeah.
That this dogma that there
Spear
were no
points.
Yeah, that there were no humans in the Americas until 13,000 years ago. That dogma locked the archaeology of the Americas in a single place for 40 or 50 years. And every single archaeologist, Jacques Mars at Bluefish Caves in the Yukon, for example, who found evidence of humans 24,000 years ago, every one of them suffered. Their research grants were pulled away from them. They were shunned at conferences. They were insulted by their colleagues. But as time passed, they were proved to be right. And this is the important issue. When I was researching America before, I went down to San Diego and talked with the team there who excavated the Cerruti Mastodon site. They think human beings have been in the Americas for 130,000 years, not 13,000, but 130,000 years. That gives you a lot of time for things to develop here in the Americas. Down in South America, there's a genetic connection between certain tribes in the Amazon and the peoples of Melanesia, of Papua New Guinea, that connection is not found anywhere in North America. So the old notion, again, it's a dogma, that human beings crossed the Bering Straits when they were a land bridge in the north and they traveled down through North America into South America. It may be that the completely opposite is true, that people were crossing the oceans tens of thousands of years ago, settling first in South America and then migrating north. And it's just very difficult for these ideas to become accepted. But little by little, this is what happens with paradigm shifts. As the new evidence keeps coming in, it becomes more and more absurd to stick to the old idea. Now, if you have human beings in the Americas for 130,000 years, then you have a possibility for an advanced civilization to have emerged right here in the Americas, in North America, in South America. And if that advanced civilization had based itself in the land that we now call the channeled scablands, there wouldn't be a single thing left of it because of the pummeling massive forces of flooding that tore across that landscape during the Younger Dryas.
Now, the prevailing theory of what happened to the civilization in the Amazon rainforest is disease, right?
And that prevailing theory is correct. It was there was a Spaniard, Francisco de Orellana, who accidentally managed to travel the entire way across the Amazon, across South America in the 1560s. I say accidentally because he was with 20 other guys. They were in a boat and they were going hunting. But they put the boat on the Amazon River, and the Amazon River wouldn't let them come back. It carried them, kept on carrying them west and west and west. And finally they started off in Colombia, and finally they ended up on the Atlantic coast of South America. Well, on the way through, they observed enormous cities. They observed evidence of high civilizations of the Amazon. He reported it, but he was disbelieved. It was thought that he was making it up, and it's these new LiDAR surveys that have confirmed that he was absolutely correct. And God knows what else might be found in the Amazon if the work were actually done.
So those initial explorers carried diseases? And
They carried diseases. This is the thing. Orellana encountered thriving, highly populated areas. 100 years later, all gone, completely gone. Not because of muskets and swords, but because of smallpox, primarily because of smallpox and other diseases that were imported from Europe that the indigenous inhabitants did not have resistance to. Just completely decimated those civilizations, almost wiped them completely from human memory. There's no doubt that biological weapon is the reason for the conquest of the Americas, that it was the diseases that were brought in. And in some cases, those diseases were deliberately spread, but in other cases, it was just an accident of contact.
And that's the exact same thing that happened in North America.
And that's the exact same thing that happened in North America, too. That's how it became so easy for Europeans to conquer, because of the diseases they brought with them. And it is, I call it the earliest known example of a biological weapon that we're seeing in the story of the Americas. And so much was wiped out, so much memory was wiped out. And then not just the killing off of the people with the diseases that Europeans brought, but the church, the way that the way that the church behaved in the Americas was appalling. The deliberate burning of Mayan codices. In one bonfire, 5,000 Mayan books were heaped up and burnt by some idiot priest. What's he doing there but wiping out the memory banks of humanity? What would we have found in those manuscripts if we'd been able to find them today, if they hadn't been burnt by some religious fanatic who was convinced that his ideas were the only right ideas and everybody else was wrong? Christianity is responsible for a great deal of harm in this world, and it's time Christians sucked it up and got to grips with that instead of regarding themselves as a paragons of virtue, because Christianity has done horrific things down through the ages. Hopefully it's learned from its experiences.
Hopefully. That doesn't seem very likely.
But it's been an instrument. Yeah. It's been an instrument of destruction of human memory.
Yes.
Those who were destroying that human memory, no doubt they fervently believed that they were right. But their belief that they were right doesn't mean they were right. They were wrong. They've deprived us of huge libraries of knowledge which would otherwise be available to us. That's why I call us a species with amnesia, that we have forgotten so much about our own past. And we're in that kind of amnesiac state where we just have a feeling that something's wrong, but we don't quite know what it is.
It's one of the more fascinating aspects of being a person today is that we have so much access to information, and that we can find out about these things now that, if you tried to bring these ideas forth in the 1970s, they'd be easily dismissed.
Yeah.
But now, because of LIDAR, because of our understanding of what disease did to North America and what the Christians did, and it's a far more compelling conversation.
Yeah. And the internet.
Yes.
Well, I regard the internet as a poisoned chalice. There are wonderful gifts in the internet, but there's also terrible problems with the internet. But the one thing the internet has done is it's allowed people to communicate directly with one another. We don't have to go through the middleman, the big newspaper proprietor or the big TV station. We don't have to go through the middleman in order to get to people. We can talk to one another directly and share ideas, hopefully in a fertile way. It's sad that so much of the internet is just filled with hatred and fear and suspicion and people being utterly obnoxious to one another. But nevertheless, I'd rather have it than not have it, because it's opened up so many doors of inquiry that would otherwise remain closed.
I like to think, when I was born, mid-20th century, we had zero presence in space. No satellites. We'd never put up a single satellite, right? We're in a position now where we can really begin to perceive things on levels that a few generations ago were inconceivable, both on the microscopic and certainly we know how important the microscopic realm has been.
Yes.
When we start talking about nanodiamonds and microspherules and all of this, and in being able to demonstrate that these great catastrophes have happened. I kind of use the analogy of fingerprints, which I borrowed from Graham. But fingerprints, on a crime scene, you don't really see those without technological enhancement. Footprints, on the other hand, you can see them. They're obvious. They're, footprints in the ground. So I kind of look at the Channel Scablands. Those are obvious footprints on the global landscape that are unambiguous, right? Then on the other hand, the microspherules, the nanodiamonds, and the things like that, those are the things that you can't see without the technological enhancement, without scanning electron microscopy or energy dispersive.
Can I just butt
Yeah,
in there
go ahead.
to elaborate on the nanodiamonds? This is one of the reasons we know that there was a series of airbursts and bits of a comet that hit the Earth 12,800 years ago, because all around the world there is a layer in the soil. You can go down to Murray Springs in Arizona. There's a draw that was cut by floods there, and along the side of the draw you can see a line in the earth about the width of a human hand, and that is the Younger Dryas boundary, and it's full of what are called impact proxies, things that could only be created by the massive heat and shock of an impact of an object from space. And those include nanodiamonds, these tiny diamonds which we would not see without high-level tech allowing us to see down into
here's
the
the layer.
minuscule world. That's it. That's
Murray Springs.
That's the Younger Dryas boundary layer at Murray Springs.
Which
And
one's the layer?
the dark layer. There's better shots of it, but it's that dark layer. It runs all along the side of the springs, and for the series we went there with Alan West from the Comet Research Group, and he explained to us exactly what's going on here. And that's the first clues that led them to believe that we're dealing with a comet impact 12,800 years ago. And I don't want to misuse that word. It's not a single object. It's multiple objects. It's a swarm of objects. Those objects hit all around the world. They hit in North America, but they also hit in Syria. Interestingly, there's a site called Abu Huraira, which is very near to Göbekli Tepe in Syria, which was hit by what they believe was an airburst of a fragment of a comet. If we go back to 1908, June 1908, many people will know that an event took place in Siberia. It's called the Tunguska event. Interestingly enough, that date, June 1908, is one of the two periods in the year, June and November, when the Earth passes through the Taurid meteor stream. And what happened there was that an object that's estimated to have been about 100 meters in diameter blew up in the air over Siberia. It flattened 2,000 square miles of trees. It was an uninhabited area. Nobody was killed. But if that had happened over a major city, it would have been cataclysmic. And that was just a small bit. And it left the same traces in the soil, the same nanodiamonds, the same evidence of... Another really intriguing thing is melted quartz. It takes temperatures of 2,000 plus degrees centigrade to melt quartz. And you find melted quartz all over this Younger Dryas boundary layer. You find iridium, another object, another substance that can only come in with asteroids and comets from outer space. So the evidence is mounting, the evidence is building, and the team of scientists at the Comet Research Group, as I mentioned earlier, they've just now got some major funding. We are going, and if again, I talked about that happy billionaire who I would like to see put some money into LiDAR surveys in the Amazon. I'd like to see them put some money into the Comet Research Group as well, because they've funded themselves all the way along now, but now they've got some major funding. We're going to see some huge breakthroughs in that field. And it doesn't matter how much other scientists dislike what they're doing, they are giving us the data. The data ultimately is what matters, not people's opinion. And the data speaks to a gigantic worldwide apocalypse 12,800 years ago.
Jamie, can I have the sacred cable back?
I have to pee. So let's pause, and we'll come back and get back to this.
Sounds
We're
good.
right back. Okay, we're back.
Are we back?
Yeah. Here we go. Okay.
Oh, there we go. All right, so this is just sort of a graphic I put together to show the Taurid meteor stream. And this is based, there's two ellipses here, which goes back to the work of Fred Whipple way back in the 1940s, who was the first one to realize that the Taurid meteor stream was the byproduct of this ongoing fragmentation of an original giant comet. Because what he was able to do when he did this succession of photographs is he was able to run the orbits in reverse. And once he did that, he could see that these separate pieces within the stream all converged on the same point in space, which told him that they were once one object. So, but anyways, what we've got here is, you'll notice here's Mercury, or orbit of Mercury. I should get my glasses here. orbit of Venus, and then this third ring here is the orbit of the Earth. The green arrows show the direction of the orbit, so here's the orbit of the Earth. And here is the green arrows again show the direction of orbit of the stream. And you can see that the Earth's orbit crosses the stream late June, early July, right here. And then again, it crosses the stream around now, November, late October, early November. And this has led the Taurid stream to sometimes be referred to as the Halloween meteors because they peak right around Halloween. Okay, so what was the date of Tunguska?
June 30th,
June
1908.
30th. Yes. So the timing was perfect. The other thing was that the position where the meteor emanated from space was perfect because you can see that as the stream comes around the sun, if you're here on the Earth and you're looking up the stream, and here was the problem, why the object wasn't seen until the last few moments is because you had to almost look directly into the sun. And this is why some of the eyewitnesses described that it looked like the object was born out of the sun, or that the sun split in two and this fiery object came and exploded. You know, it didn't, here's an important point, it did not hit the ground.
It was an airburst.
It was an airburst. And a lot of what we might be talking about with the Younger Dryas would be airbursts. I just did a whole presentation on October 30th talking about the universal observance of the Festival of the Dead and its connections with the Taurid meteor stream. It's a very fascinating presentation. If somebody wants to learn more about this,
I got this one at Toys R Us for, I think, $30. $40 maybe?
RandyCarlson.com.
Okay.
Okay. So
This was years ago. This was 2009.
when you're here, you're looking up towards the sun. But when you're looking upstream here, you're
would
looking
get a new
out
one.
into space
I have no monies right
directly
now.
towards the Pleiades.
Very important constellation across the ancient world.
Yes. And the Pleiades in traditional
I saw you were looking at them.
astrological
the new one.
context
Yeah.
is the shoulder
$700.
of the bull,
Holy
Taurus the
shit,
bull.
dude. Yeah, it's nice though. It's
And
really
you
nice.
can go back and there's lots of mythologies about, the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the Gilgamesh and Enkidu do battle with the bull of heaven.
And that's why it's called the Taurid meteor stream, because
Yeah.
it appears to emanate from the
I
region
saw
of
the
space in
website,
which
or I
the
saw-
constellation of Taurus
I saw
is.
a
It's not
website.
coming to us from Taurus,
No,
but it looks like it is.
it looks like it is, right? Yeah. This is the general idea right here. You've got a radiant. The meteors are actually coming in parallel lines, but when you look upstream, they're all emanating from a point in space. So all meteor streams get their name from the constellation that they appear to be coming from. So the Leonids, obviously Leo. The Geminids, Gemini.
Orionids, Orion.
Exactly. The Taurids, Taurus. So
The Pleiades.
we won't get into this a whole
That
lot.
Tunguska event, you had some calculations on the size of the
Yes, the
event.
power of that event has been estimated based upon the destruction of the old growth taiga forest. They were able to estimate how much energy, and the equivalent of that was about a 15 megaton hydrogen bomb. Now, how do you wrap your head around what a 15 megaton explosion would look like? Well, I got a graphic here that actually is an artist's depiction of what a 15 megaton explosion over a major city would look like. There we go.
Oh, Jesus.
That is a 15 megaton explosion. Now,
that-
Tunguska was one object that was about 150 feet in diameter, moving at a couple of tens of thousands of miles per hour. So it's got this tremendous amount of potential energy. It comes in so fast that the
Jesus.
atmosphere
Yeah,
can't
really.
move out of the way. The atmosphere piles up in front of it, becomes like a
I want
solid-
that job.
like a
that,
brick wall.
That artist.
And the object exploded maybe 5 miles up. Devastated like Graham said, it was 2,000 some square kilometers, about 825 square miles of old-growth taiga forest got completely obliterated. Now, if you want to try to wrap your head around what happened during the Younger Dryas, think a couple of thousand of these. It would have been like an all-out nuclear war. And it's left its traces all over the planet. Everywhere we've looked, in fact.
Yeah.
And this happened many times for 1,000 years?
I think there were multiple impacts. It's clear that there was a peak of impacts 12,800 years ago. I personally think, and this is not the Comet Research Group point of view, but I think it was another series of impacts 11,600 years ago that brought the Younger Dryas to an end. And quite possibly an impact in a major ocean that led to the global warming with a huge cloud of water vapor thrown up into the air. That's actually not my thesis. I've adopted it, but it's the work of Sir Fred Hoyle, a leading astronomer back in the 80s, who suggested that. There were the 1,200 years of the Younger Dryas was 1,200 years of continuous cataclysm. And it was on an enormous scale. And the reason the Tunguska event matters is because it happened pretty much in our time. It happened in 1908. It tells us that we're still in interaction with the Taurid meteor stream, that it's not a distant and unimportant danger. It's a real and present danger. If that object that exploded over Siberia in 1908 had exploded over a major city, we'd all be paying very close attention to the Taurid meteor stream today, because the results would have been absolutely catastrophic. But then, as Randall says, take that back 12,800 years ago. Look at the massive bombardment that took place then. Evidence as far west as the west coast of America, evidence as far east as Syria. You're looking at a worldwide event. Thousands of airbursts, huge numbers of objects coming in, some of them hitting the North American ice cap physically, some of them actually exploding in the air. The end result fully explains how we could have lost a whole civilization from the record.
Wow. That's so compelling and so based on evidence.
Yeah, it is based on evidence, and again, it's evidence that largely, unfortunately, is being ignored. And often when I talk about this, I'm told, don't be a fear monger, don't spread fear. But actually, I don't want to spread fear. I want to spread awareness, because we're not helpless. That's one of the good things about our tech. We actually have reached a level where we can do something about dangerous objects that the Earth is interacting with in space.
In fact, that has been done recently for the first time.
For the first time.
Yeah.
DART, that pushing an asteroid just slightly off course we now know that that's a practical possibility. That's all you'd need to do with the dangerous objects in the Taurid meteor stream, but it would require a combined effort of all the advanced cultures on Earth today in order to bring that about. It would be a big project, but it would be a worthy project, and I can think of many unworthy projects that the big nations are investing in at the moment, which we really don't need. This would be one that would be really rather useful.
Yeah, wouldn't it be better to cooperate and come up with a way of defending this planet? And see, you talk to some people about this, and they kind of consign it to the realm of science fiction. But clearly, I mean, just a couple of days ago, a new asteroid was discovered within the orbit of Venus that had been completely invisible, and it was huge. Now, it's not Earth-crossing, but I think we mentioned this the last time I was on here. You remember, I went through this whole series since the late 1980s showing the near misses that have occurred every few months. Over and over again, I showed that on your show the last time I was here. Those are real. Those are real. And sooner or later, I mean, they're out there now that have our planet's name on them, our name and our number. We just haven't discovered them yet. I mean, the estimates now of potentially dangerous Earth-crossing asteroids is maybe 10%.
Of what's actually out there.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we're not only dealing with a lost civilization of the past, we're also dealing with a potential lost civilization of the future.
And if that happened to us, one of the big problems with today's information is it's stored on hard drives.
All gone.
All gone.
All gone, completely. And another big problem is that the majority of people in the advanced industrialized so-called civilizations don't have a clue about how to survive.
Right.
I know you do.
Barely.
but you've developed some skills. But I don't have those skills, and most of us don't have those skills to survive. Who would we take refuge with if our civilization went down? We would have to take refuge with hunter-gatherers, because hunter-gatherers are absolutely the masters of survival. And I think that's what happened 12,000, 11,000 years ago. The survivors of a higher civilization, I don't like the word higher, but a different kind of civilization, took refuge amongst hunter-gatherers and created projects like Göbekli Tepe, which were used to instruct and to teach and to bring in something new. We have 2 episodes in Turkey in my series. One episode is all about Göbekli Tepe, but Göbekli Tepe, 11,600 years old, isn't alone. There's another site we were the first film crew to get into,
but
called Karahan
I love the animals
which
too
is
much.
now been
I can't
excavated.
kill a fucking
Dates
animal
from the same
in
period.
nature.
It's
Maybe
the
if
most
I'm fucking
extraordinary
starving, but I love them too
amazing
much.
site.
I know I just ate a deer
Nobody knew
cow.
it was
Thank you,
there
dear blessed
until
cow.
a
I
decade
don't mean
ago.
to
Furthermore, they
make
found
your
another
death a joke,
11
but, like,
sites, all
I
of
could
them
never do that.
in a ring around Göbekli Tepe, all of them indivisible from one another because they're on hilltops. They've discovered them, but they haven't yet been excavated.
No, cute
It's
a fucking
fascinating
rabbit
that
is.
they all date to this period of 11,600 years ago. Another thing that we do in another episode of the series is we look at the so-called underground cities of Turkey. This is quite a famous phenomenon in Turkey, that there are huge cities. They look like ant farms on an enormous scale that are dug out under the earth. Hundreds and hundreds of rooms. That huge efforts was put into digging deep beneath the earth and creating these shelters. And archaeology does not have a good explanation about what they're there for, or why they were built, or when they were built. They're all cut out of stone. You can only date objects that were left in them. You can't say when they were actually made. What makes sense of those underground cities to me is that they were built as places of refuge that people could go into during an episode of meteor bombardment during the Younger Dryas, because there wasn't just the one 12,800 years ago, there were multiple episodes over the next 1,200 years. It makes sense that these underground cities were built as places of shelter, not as places to hide from an invading army. The last place you want to go if you have an invading army is to go hide underground. All they have to do is block up the entrances. They don't even have to fight you, you know. But if you're dealing with a periodic event which will be over in a couple of weeks, they're great places to retreat into. The evidence is all around us, all around the world, and that's why I've made this series, because I want to show people that it's not just a single thing. There's a huge story here.
When they date objects that they find in these underground cities, what are the dates they find?
The oldest, they actually have no idea. They were used by Christians, they were used by Muslims, they were used back in 2,000 plus years ago, but as homes in some cases. There's some evidence that they going back 2,800 years, but it's all from objects found inside them, and those objects don't tell us when the original work of cutting out these enormous structures, and it took an enormous will to create them. There's not just one. There's dozens of them.
Can we find those, Jimmy? I'm sorry, Randall. You got the.
Pass the sacred cord.
Or maybe you could find them.
Yeah, I could.
Derinkuyu, for example.
What's the name of the place?
Derinkuyu.
Got it right there.
What's the oldest objects they find in there?
2,800 years plus.
Whoa, look at this.
Let's
cross-section is just amazing. I spent hours down there just wandering around and looking at this amazing place, and it makes no sense to me that
it's carved into stone.
It's cut literally out of the bedrock beneath the ground. There you can see a cross-section on the left there.
Far left. Yeah.
Wow. You know, these are a huge mystery. And the fact that objects have been dated to certain periods does not tell us when they were used. Every new culture that went in there would have removed most of the stuff that was in there before. But when you ask yourself what was the motive for creating something like this, the motive is clearly to hide from a danger from above, in my view.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
The most remarkable places. And they can be visited. The two that I visited in the series are Derinkuyu and Kaimakli. And these two sites are joined by an 8-kilometer tunnel. underground.
8 kilometers.
8 kilometers long, which joins the two of them.
Dug out of stone.
Dug out of stone, the whole thing.
Wow.
You know, it's
How long would it take to complete something like this?
Well, it would take a very long time indeed. That's all I can say. Nobody's really done the calculations, but
and that one shows a vent to the sky.
Yep, they have vents. They have vents to the sky to allow air to come in. But you have to consider if you've got 10 or 15,000 people in there, they can't really stay in there much longer than about 2 or 3 weeks, which is about the time it takes to pass through the Torrid meteor stream. Otherwise, you're going to get huge amount of human refuse built up inside these. They're going to become inhospitable places. But if they're only to be used for 2 weeks at a time, then they're fine. They have air vents, they have water. They're incredibly well thought out.
There's water in there, or they store water in there?
They store water in there, yeah. Wow. And down below it, you
Whoa,
drill deeper and you come to wells.
That's incredible. Look at the sophistication of the construction, too.
Yeah. So we're looking at a series of mysteries that are unexplained by archaeology, or that are explained in unsatisfactory ways. And what I've tried to do is to offer alternative explanations that make some kind of sense of the anomalies that we're looking at. There are just too many anomalies that are not explained by the mainstream theory.
Too many anomalies.
And that's when you get a paradigm shift, when you get to the point where the mainstream theory just won't explain stuff anymore. Just like Clovis first eventually had to be thrown out by American archaeologists.
I don't think there's too many anomalies.
Keep on with that fantasy any longer, because the evidence spoke to a human presence far older than 13,000 years ago. It's beginning to happen now with the Younger Dryas impact and the events of the Younger Dryas.
It's fucking like 3 a.m. for anomaly right now.
Begin to grasp the magnitude of these things when you start talking about the tremendous earthworks of North America, of which only a small fraction still exist. The structures in the Amazon, which to me was the most incredible part of America before, was.
Thank you.
I kind of was getting the gist of it, but when I read that, I'm like, oh wow. Because I had studied considerably in depth into the North American monumental earthworks, have visited most of the extant ones that still remain, very impressive, and then find out there's even a greater magnitude in South America, in the Amazon. That was mind-blowing to me.
And many of them unexplored.
Most of them unexplored, just identified on LiDAR. Very few have been explored.
And very little of the surface has been explored even by LiDAR.
Absolutely. It's a tiny fraction, 2% maybe less than that.
So when you look at the magnitude of these extraordinary building campaigns, that you got to go, why? There had to have been a motive. You know, there's such an incongruity there between the idea of hunter-gatherers or even subsistence farmers undertaking projects of such enormous magnitude. To me, there's just a disparity there that there's a disconnect.
The so-called mound builder culture of North America has been hugely underestimated and not given the priority it deserves. That's why we devoted one episode of this series to the mound builder sites in North America, to Serpent Mound, to Poverty Point in Louisiana. Fantastic site. The thing that's not realized is that the vast majority of what stood here 600 years ago has been destroyed, turned into farmland, plowed under, just wiped away in that process of making us a species with amnesia. It happened very much in North America, but the few sites that are left speak of enormous sophistication, and the horizon keeps on going back and back and back. So Poverty Point in Louisiana, fantastic site, very large scale, enormous pyramidal structure there. But it is, and dated to about 2,700 years ago. But it's directly connected to another site, Watson Break, which is just a mile to the south. It's lined up perfectly with Watson Break. The two sites are anchored to one another. Watson Break goes back 5,300 years ago. There are other sites that go back 8,000 years ago, and these are just the ones that have survived. I think that mound builder culture, as it's called in North America, goes back deep into the Ice Age as well. We're looking again at a mystery that we only have fragments of it to try and draw conclusions from. But those fragments speak to majesty in the past of North America that has been largely ignored. And that part of the reason that it was ignored was that in the process of settling North America, it was felt useful to diminish the achievements of those whose lands were being taken over, to regard them as inferior in some way rather than superior. But when you look at the works of their hands, you see that superior people were definitely involved in North America, and that they have a very ancient culture which has been, sadly unrecognized.
And again, with the destruction caused by the Younger Dryas impact theory, most of it would be gone.
Well, absolutely. The effect of that cannot be overestimated. The scale of the flooding across North America in the 400 or 500 miles south of the ice cap, roughly, the ice cap went down roughly to about Minnesota, something like that. Everything south of that was just torn to shreds by the Younger Dryas cataclysm. Absolutely wrecked. Anything that was there that would speak to our past was destroyed by nature, completely destroyed before other human beings came along and destroyed it further. And I just think it's important that we allow alternative voices to speak out, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate about your show, Joe, because you have a major platform, you reach a major audience, and what you're doing is you're allowing alternative voices to speak out. A lot of people misunderstand what you're doing, but what you're doing is actually allowing voices that had been suppressed to speak out, and thus provide the general public with more options, with more to think about than they had before. And I really appreciate that. Can I play one more clip from the show?
Please.
Do we need to pass the sacred cable again? Here we go. Oh, here we don't go, as the case may be. And that's the one called, it begins with the word Joe. Joe, you very kindly appeared in my series. And I'm grateful to you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. It's my honor.
And this is
I'm so excited that this is a thing.
Yeah, so am I. Let's. I just hope that it has the impact that I believe it will.
There's people that come along, and because of their impact, it changes the way people look at things. Graham Hancock is a man who, despite all of the insults and all the people disparaging his work, he has trekked on and on and on.
What I care about is learning the lessons of the past in order to clear away that fog that surrounds prehistory. And it's a fog because there's no documents. We have to build our picture of the past from fragmentary evidence.
Yay.
Yay. There's huge forces at work that would like this to be shut down. Archaeologists are already complaining to Netflix and saying this show should never be put on the air. Hancock, has to be kept silent, basically. They say that I'm misleading the public. I think the public are intelligent
no, it's all good, bro, dude. I just made reservations for restaurants and shit. Like,
to come on here
I'm
and
doing a bunch of shit here. I'm back, though. I'm back.
That would be fascinating.
I would love to do that.
Fascinating to see their argument about the Younger Dryas impact theory, about all of this, because it seems so compelling and so overwhelmingly evidence-based.
Okay,
absolutely. It would be a great debate to have.
Dude,
very few archaeologists are willing to
walking streams
I think you'd have a hard time getting
blowing up, man.
someone to
The
come
chat.
on here. They will make excuses like they won't lower themselves to engaging about such ideas.
Or
but
giving him a platform. That's my favorite one.
That's the one they use a lot. Yeah.
Too late.
Is that coffee?
Sure, get in there,
Just
buddy.
a little shot, a couple of inches maybe.
All right, you got it.
That'll do. Thank you.
No, it's really been fascinating to be a fan of your work, to get to know you, and you were one of the very first guests that we ever had.
Joe, we go back a long way.
Yeah, because you were one of the very first guests that wasn't just a comedian, like a friend of mine.
Right.
And I was so excited about that episode that we did with Duncan Trussell.
Yes, that's right.
And Duncan and I have always followed your work. We've both been giant fans of yours, but it's so interesting to see it becoming more and more accepted.
Yes.
And because of all the work with the Younger Dryas impact theory, now substantiated by real hard evidence.
Yeah, that's very encouraging to me too, because I take a lot of flack and a lot of insults for what I do and for what I say. And what's happened little bit by little bit, is the evidence has come in, which doesn't allow those critics to say what they still say it, but they can't say it with any authority anymore. Göbekli Tepe just destroyed the argument that the Sphinx can't be 12,000 years old. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis destroys the argument that there was no cataclysm 12,000 years ago. There's just more and more evidence coming out, and I think we're going to see.
I know
much
it's
more
hard to talk over the podcast, but
yeah.
I was in Windsor and I saw a guy standing outside a closed
we have
Cineplex.
a conference coming up next
really
year,
sad,
which is going to be called the Cosmic Summit, and I think it's in June.
Considering his entire life, he was a Gen Xer.
I'll put it up on my website, which is grahamhancock.com, and
it'll be on mine as well.
I'm a millennial. He was a Gen X.
There it is. Look at that.
There it is.
They're a little harder. They're a little more bitter.
That's June 16th.
They kind of matured before the internet.
Scroll up there, Jamie, so I see who's on there.
I kind of grew up with it.
Oh, yeah. Jimmy Corsetti, who's been on the podcast before as well.
Keep going. I think we can find. There's some
Johanna James.
So movies and shit.
Alan West's
going
to join us. We're having. That's one of the good things about this. We're having a number of the scientists from the Comet Research Group who are going to join us and speak at the event. So it's going to be a mixture of
like a
outsiders, alternative thinkers like ourselves, and mainstream scientists who are proposing this new science.
I saw his name.
Yeah, Keith Tankersby.
West. Yeah,
$10? Holy shit, dude. Well, of course.
These are all leading scientists.
Little Mermaid made like $110 million or some crazy shit, man. Like the movies are. I think it's gonna come back, man.
The research behind the
like it's a smart idea to at least diversifying that. I think $10.
Go down.
That's crazy.
Stop. Go down. This is somebody, like Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer. I would like.
You think it's just all gonna be online now? Maybe.
He's Well, you can read about him right there.
With Uber Eats, I'm learning people would rather
the U.S. Space Force,
Air Force Academy
graduate, fighter pilot, relieved of his duties in 2021 for writing a book encouraging the reform of the U.S. military.
Than to like receive it in hand by me.
And he would absolutely love to.
People don't want to fucking do anything. And
I would love to. What was his? What did he? That book that he wrote that relieved him of his duties.
He was basically exposing the wokeness that was infecting the military.
Mm-hmm.
The political.
Wow. Yeah, Netflix is blowing up with their movies.
They spent millions of dollars training
Netflix
this
movies,
guy,
Amazon
and they
movies.
dismiss him because he was telling the truth about what's happening, how the military is becoming.
That's what I mean.
Becoming
with the internet and everything. Hollywood has become.
Which it's not supposed to be. It's
everywhere. Ottawa. They film a lot of movies in Ottawa now.
He's a good man, and he's going to be joining us.
Because Ottawa sucks.
Yeah.
And what is he?
I have not met him.
What is he speaking about on this?
I think he's going to. Well, before all this pandemic stuff hit, he contacted me. I think he heard me on your show.
And the food pricing, they got way too fucking.
He was based, I think,
way
in Huntsville,
too
and he was
greedy
about
with
to
the food
assume
pricing, man.
Command of the Space Force.
The food gouging. I haven't bought food at a fucking movie theater
he's got the whole.
Since I was like.
Jamie, pull up Matt Lohmeyer.
14,
Donald Trump.
15. $10 powder cola and popcorn. No, man. It's crazy. What happened here? Alright, now it's time for the mullahs, I guess. Oh no, I gotta use YouTube on fucking. We gotta use the ad block YouTube. Firefox.
Leonard Woolley, an archaeologist from Britain, returned to Iraq in 1922, almost 4,000 years after the nuclear ancient catastrophe, to uncover ancient Mesopotamia. An imposing ziggurat standing out in the desert plain drew him to the nearby site of Tel El Mukayyam, where he began excavating. As old walls, artifacts and inscriptions were unearthed, He realized he was digging up ancient Ur of the Chaldees. 12 years of his work were conducted through a joint expedition between the British Museum in London and the University of Pennsylvania Museum in Philadelphia. For those institutions, Sir Leonard Woolley found some of the most dramatic objects and artifacts in Ur. However, what he discovered may well surpass anything ever exhibited before. In the course of removing layers of soil deposited by desert sands, the elements, and time from the ruins, the ancient city began to take shape. Here were the walls, there were the harbours and canals, the residential quarters,
Unskippable?
and the tumult.
Really? What do you
Sacred
mean?
area.
For TV viewers? What the fuck
Discovery
is
of a
TV
cemetery
viewers?
dated thousands of
YouTube
years
TV?
ago included unique
Is that like a
royal tombs
subscription?
discovered by digging at its edge is the find of the century.
No, dude, I haven't watched an ad in a
The
long time, man.
excavations in the city's residential sections established that
Ad
Ur's
blocker on
inhabitants
YouTube or on
followed the
Firefox.
Sumerian custom of burying
You gotta
their
switch
dead
between browsers, but now
right
it seems
under the floors
Firefox
of
is the
their
one.
dwellings, where families continued to live. It was thus highly unusual to find a cemetery with as many as 1,800 graves
Diversify
in it.
your ad blockers and
From
browsers.
pre-dynastic, before kingship began, to Seleucid times, they were concentrated mainly within the sacred precinct. The graves were buried on top of each other. Burials were interred in another grave.
Dick,
And
did you
some
know
graves
that
were apparently
I could
reinterred. To date,
make
graves more
subscribers watch
Woolly's
ads?
workers dug
You know how
trenches
terrible
up to
that
50
is?
feet deep to cut
Can you
through
imagine that
burials.
anymore?
The
That may
bodies
be
were
me in the
typically
future,
buried
but
in
I'm not gonna
hollows
do
in the
that.
ground, lying on their backs.
So it's like,
Woolly
what's the
believed
point?
that these different inhumations were recorded based
But I
on
can.
social or
There's
religious
a button.
status.
There's like a big
In the southeastern part of
fuck
the
you
sacred
button on
precinct,
Twitch.
Woolley discovered 660 completely different burials, with 16 exceptions. The bodies were either wrapped in reed mats as a kind of shroud, or encased in wooden coffins, a more substantial distinction because the wood was scarce and relatively expensive in Sumer. After their death, each of them was buried in a rectangular pit deep enough to hold them. Men and women were thus buried sideways, not on their backs as in common.
Is that the poem you're talking about? Have everything. How are you, gorgeous?
Noah, the first story.
How are you, babyface?
Biblical deluge stories are not original.
It's nice.
The Hebrew authors of the Bible are credited for discovering and deciphering the 11th tablet of the Sumerian
Yeah,
Epic
baby, yeah,
of
is that too
Gilgamesh
late?
by the British Museum's George Smith. The Babylonian deluge myth originates from Sumerian mythology. Arno Probel published a fragment comprising the lower third of a 6-column Sumerian
I'd love
tablet
to, baby.
in the Nippur collection
That makes
of the
sense. I think
University
it makes-
Museum
I was
in
thinking about that
1914.
too, and I was like, you know,
Its contents are primarily devoted to the story of the flood. Although scholars have been looking for additional deluge tablets, no further fragment has been found in any museum, private collection or excavation. Even though Pobel is our sole
where
source,
is
the
Divinity?
translation he prepared is
Yeah,
still
we can do that.
rudimentary and standard. A lone tablet containing the contents of a flood episode is notable, not just because of that episode, but also
Okay,
because
yeah, of course,
it is
we can do that.
primarily about flooding. The same holds for the passages preceding and introducing the deluge's story. These passages impact Sumerian cosmology. These texts contain several telling statements concerning the creation of man, the origin of kingship, and the existence of at least 5 prehistoric
she sounds
cities.
Flexible. That's good.
The following is
We're flexible
practically the
and it's good.
entire extant text
I'm so
of the myth,
excited.
with its tantalizing obscurities and uncertainties. Cuneiformists face many challenges and are in for several surprises in the future. No date
I
can
don't
be
know,
given
my
for
love.
the appearance of
He
myths.
said
There is a
that,
break of about
he's good at
37
that
lines in
time.
the lower third of the preserved tablet. A deity then addresses other deities. He is probably declaring
He said
that
he's
he
good
will
with
save
that
humanity from extinction, and that, as a result, man will construct the cities and temples of the gods. The address is followed by 3 lines that describe the deity's actions to make his words effective but are hard to relate to the context. 4 more lines follow, beginning with the creation of man, animals and plants. Overall, it reads like this. I will destroy my humankind in its destruction. I will return their tenentu by my creatures. I will return the people to their homes. They will build the divine laws, and I will comfort them with my shade. Their bricks will be laid in pure places for our houses. Places of purity will be the places of our decisions. There was a pure fire quenching the water. Rituals were perfected, and divine laws were exalted. He accomplished this on earth. He put the law in place. Then, the earth sprouted lush vegetation. After Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag fashioned the black-headed people. Creatures with 4 legs of the plain were created creatively. Approximately 37 lines later, we learn that the kingship was lowered from heaven and 5 cities were established. Following the throne of kingship were lowered from heaven. After the exalted tiara and throne of kingship were lowered from heaven. By perfecting the rites and the exalted divine laws, establishing 5 pure cities. They were referred to as cult centers and given names. He gave Eridu, the first of these cities, to Nudimmud, the leader, and Bad-Tabira, the second. He gave the third, Larak, to Ender-Bilasag. Flood, Ark, and Sumerian Noah. The only document of this myth is Arno Pobol's handwritten copy of the Flood tablet in the University Museum. The fourth, Sipar, gave the hero Utu. The fifth, Sharupak, he gave to Sud. Once he named these cities, he assigned them as cult centers. Then he established the cleaning of small rivers.
Welcome to this YouTube channel. In this video we are going to talk about top 10 facts about Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. So before starting this video, like this video, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for future updates. The Shahnameh or Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, is the national epic of Greater Iran, authored by the Persian poet Ferdowsi between 977 and 1010 CE. The Shahnameh is one of the world's longest epic poems, with about 50,000 distichs or couplets, 2-line lines. It primarily recounts the Persian Empire's mythical and, to a lesser extent, historical history from the dawn of time to the Muslim conquest in the 7th century. This national epic is commemorated throughout Iran, Azerbaijan, Afghanistan, and other Persian-influenced countries such as Georgia, Armenia, Turkey, and Dagestan. Here are the 10 facts about Shahnameh. Number 10. The work is considered a literary masterpiece, and the definitive expression of Iran's ethno-national, cultural identity in Persian culture and language. It is especially significant for modern Zoroastrians, since it chronicles the historical connections between the religion's origins, and the death of the last Sassanid ruler, which put an end to Zoroastrianism's power in Iran. Ferdowsi began work on the Shahnameh in 977 and finished it on March 8, 1010. Number 9. The Shahnameh is a poetic and historical monument, primarily a poetic rendition of what Ferdowsi, his contemporaries, and predecessors considered to be the record of Iran's ancient history. Many similar narratives were already written down in prose, such as the Abu Mansuri Shahnameh. Ferdowsi's work includes a few passages dispersed throughout the Shahnameh, that are totally his own creation. Number 8. The Shahnameh is an epic poem written in early New Persian with about 50,000 couplets. It is mostly based on a prose work of the same name compiled in Ferdowsi's native Tus during his earlier life. This prose Shahnameh was, in turn, a translation of a Pahlavi, Middle Persian, work known as the Code-Nama, Book of Rulers, a late Sasanian compilation of the history of Persia's kings and heroes from mythological times until Khosrau II's reign, 590 to 628. The Code-Nama provided historical information for the latter Sasanian period, but no historical sources for the early Sasanian period appear to have been used 3rd to 4th centuries. Ferdowsi contributed material that continued the saga, until the Muslim troops overthrew the Sasanians in the middle of the 7th century. Number 7. Dakiki, a contemporary of Ferdowsi, poet at the court of the Samanid Empire, was the first to attempt versification of the Pahlavi Chronicle, but he was murdered violently after only finishing 1,000 poems. These lyrics, which relate with the rise of the prophet Zoroaster, were later integrated into Ferdowsi's own poetry with acknowledgement. Shahname's style combines elements of both written and oral literature. Some suggest Ferdowsi also used Zoroastrian nasks as sources, such as the now lost Shaddad. Number 6. Many other Pahlavi sources were used in the epic's composition, the most notable of which was the Karnamar Ardashir Babakan, which was originally written during the late Sassanid era, and gave accounts of how Ardashir I came to power, that are thought to be highly accurate due to their historical proximity. The text is written in late Middle Persian, which is the direct descendant of modern Persian. According to Zabihullah Safa, a large amount of the historical chronicles contained in Shahnameh are based on this epic, and there are several phrases and terms that may be matched between Ferdowsi's poem and this source. Number 5. According to Iranian tradition, Ferdowsi was upset by the demise of the Sassanid Empire and the ensuing rule of Arabs and Turks over the country. According to this view, the Shahnameh is primarily an attempt by him to preserve the memory of Persia's golden days, and convey it to a new generation so that they can learn and try to construct a better world. Despite the fact that most academics believe Ferdowsi's primary priority was the preservation of the pre-Islamic legacy of myth and history, a number of authors have formally contested this viewpoint. This section of the Shahnameh is very short, about 2,100 verses, or 4% of the overall book, and it describes events with the predictability, simplicity, and speed of a historical work. Number 4. Following an opening in praise of God and wisdom, the Shahnameh recounts the Sasanian belief in the creation of the world and man. After this, the account of the first man, Kiamaz, who also became the first king after a period of mountain living, is told. His grandson Hushung, son of Simak, found fire by accident and named the Sadeh feast after it. This part tells the stories of Tarmuras, Jamshid, Zarq, Kawa or Kava, Feridun, and his 3 sons Sam, Tur, and Araj, as well as his grandson Manacher. Almost 2/3 of the Shahnameh is devoted to the Age of Heroes, which spans Manacher's reign to Alexander the Great's conquest. This epoch is also known as the Kingdom of Chaonian, which established a long history of heroic epochs based on myth and legend. The Sakar or Sistani heroes, who appear as the empire's backbone, play a significant role during this time period. Garshasp is referenced briefly with his son Nariman, whose own son Sam served as the main paladin of Manacher when reigning in Sistan. His son Zal and Zal's son Rostam, the bravest of the courageous, were his successors, followed by Farmeds. The romance of Zal and Rudba, Rostam's 7 stages, or labors, Rostam and Sorab, Sayavash and Sudabar, Rostam and Akvan Div, Bijan and Manijay romance, the conflicts with Afrasiab, Dakiki's retelling of the narrative of Goshtasp and Arhasp, and Rostam and Esfandia are among the stories mentioned in this. Number 3. The Shahnameh teaches a wide range of moral virtues, according to Jalal Khalagi Mutlaq, including worship of one God, religious uprightness,
so
patriotism,
cool,
love of wife, family, and children, and assisting the needy. The Shahnameh contains themes that have been viewed with distrust by successive Iranian rulers. The epic was generally overlooked during the reign of Muhammad Reza Shah in favor of more opaque, arcane, and dryly intellectual Persian literature. Historians observe that the epic's subject of regicide and monarch's incapacity did not sit well with the Iranian monarchy. Later, Muslim personalities such as Ali Shariati, the idol of Islamic reformist youth in the 1970s, were critical of the Shahnameh's contents since it contained passages critical of Islam. Ferdowsi coined the phrase Tof Bar to Ey Chark I Garden, Tof. Spit on your face, O heavens spit, to refer to the Muslim invaders who despoiled Zoroastrianism. Following the Shahnameh, a number of other works of a similar sort appeared in the Persian language's cultural domain over the years. All of these works were inspired by the Shahnameh in style and manner, but none of them were able to acquire the same level of reputation and popularity. Number 2. Some experts feel that the existence of works like the Shahnameh, which have had lasting and significant cultural and linguistic influence, is the fundamental reason why the modern Persian language today is more or less the same as that of Ferdowsi's time over 1,000 years ago. To put it another way, the Shahnameh has become one of the most important pillars of modern Persian literature. As indicated by countless references to the Shahnameh in their works, studying Ferdowsi's masterpiece became a necessity for acquiring mastery of the Persian language by later Persian poets. The Turanians of Shahnameh, whose sources are based on Avesta and Pahlavi scriptures, have no connections with Turks, contrary to
What's
popular
happening? We're
perception.
learning about
The
the
Turanians of Shahnameh are an Iranian people
Parsis
who represent Iranian nomads
in
from the
India,
Eurasian
apparently.
steppes and have no resemblance to
your
Turkish
hometown,
culture.
your homeland.
Turan, the Persian designation for the lands of Central Asia beyond the Oxus up until the 7th century, when the Shahnameh ends, was predominantly an Iranian-speaking region. The scope of the Iranian epic's influence is illustrated by the Turks who recognized it as their own ancient history as well as that of Iran, writes Richard Fry. The Turks were so inspired by this cycle of legends that the Karakhanid dynasty in Central Asia called itself the family of Afrasiab, as it is known in Islamic history, in the 11th century AD. Number 1. Fath Ali Bondari Esfahani, a Persian scholar from Isfahan, completed the sole known Arabic translation of the Shahnameh in 1220 at the request of Al-Muazzam Isa, the Ayyubid governor of Damascus. The translation is Nasa, unrhyming, and it was mostly forgotten until historian Abdul Wahab Azam printed it in full in Egypt in 1932. This modern edition was based on fragmented copies unearthed in Cambridge, Paris, Astana, Cairo, and Berlin that were incomplete and mostly imprecise. The latter had the most exact, full, and well-preserved Arabic form of original Bondari's translation. A variety of English versions exist, almost all of which are abridged. In his 1832 publication for the Oriental Translation Fund of Great Britain and Ireland, now part of the Royal Asiatic Society, James Atkinson of the East India Company's medical service undertook a translation into English. The Arthur Brothers and Edmund Warner released a 9-volume translation of the whole text between 1905 and 1925, which is now out of print. There are also 2 current incomplete translations of the
What was that
Shahnameh,
photo of?
Reuben
Just a
Levy's
random white guy?
1967 prose version, later edited by Armin Banani, and Dick Davis's 2006 poetry and prose version. In 2013, Ahmad Sadri published a new English translation of the work in prose. The Shahnameh traditions have also been preserved by the Parsis, Zoroastrians, whose forefathers fled to India in the 8th or 10th century to follow their religion in peace. Dr. Barman Sohrab G. Surti, with the help of Mars Banjara, released the first full translation of the Shahnameh from Persian verse to English prose in 7 volumes between 1986 and 1988. There are several French and German translations available. Italo Pizzi has produced an 8-volume Italian translation under the title Il Libro dei Re. 8 vol. Torino, Vincenzo Bona, 1886–1888, Poema Epico Riccardo dal Persiano in Versi Italiani da Italo, Pizzi, later reissued in 2 volumes with a compendium, from UTET, Turin, 1915. Between 1914 and 1918, Dastur Faramroz Kutar and his brother Ervad Mahir Kutar translated the Shahnameh into Gujarati verse and prose and released 10 volumes. The Islamic Research Institute at McGill University's Tehran branch has issued a 2-volume Spanish translation. What do you think about this video? Do let us know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.
In the city of Cyprus in 300 BC, there lived a very wealthy trader called Zeno. While on a voyage from Phoenicia to Piraeus, his boat sank, along with all of his cargo. Because of that single event, an event that was entirely out of Zeno's or anyone's control, this very wealthy man suddenly became poor in an instant. Imagine you were Zeno. How would you react to your entire life's work getting flushed down the drain by the sheer force of nature? What is the proper reaction? Would you be angry, sad? Would you feel life has cheated you? For most of us, these would all be normal reactions. But not for Zeno, the father of Stoicism. One small change lasts an eternity, and one small reframing of your mindset can cascade into larger and more impactful changes later down the line. The core of Stoicism is the very definition of acceptance and indifference. After reading the works of Socrates and other great philosophers, Zeno created and taught Stoicism. According to Zeno, although we don't have much control over what happens to us, we do have control of how it affects us, and we must use this control to great effect. Rather than crying over spilled milk, or in this case, drowned goods, Zeno focused on maintaining his composure over the situation, remaining calm and neutral, despite his predicament. Today, people inadvertently view Stoics as people who cannot be broken, people who don't often linger to the emotional extremes, going through things like fits of rage or bouts of anxiety. But the original idea behind Stoicism was much more than that. Rather than just a way to describe people who are unemotional, Stoicism was a way to view, describe, and understand the world. It was a way of life, and that way of life has lasted for centuries. Stoic philosophy can be applied to situations today the same way it was applied thousands of years ago, and its benefits are just as impactful. Stoicism allows us to process these negative emotions from negative experiences, and turn them into the thoughts that give us a unique perspective of the world. Perspective is everything, and everyone in the world has different experiences and thus different perspectives on things. Since the Stoics gathered, discussed, and taught philosophy in a public place, their general philosophy was widely known. They believed that the Stoic principles could greatly benefit anyone and everyone, and so it didn't make sense for them to hide that knowledge behind the four walls of a school or of the palace courtyards. As a result, everyone from slave to emperor could learn and become a Stoic. And they did. Some of the world's most notable Stoics include Epictetus, which translates to acquired, as he was once owned as a slave, Seneca, who was a well-renowned statesman, and Marcus Aurelius, a
Yeah,
Roman
I've never
emperor
heard of it
and one of
before.
the most powerful men to have ever lived. The early Stoics practiced
Basically
what
not
they
giving a
preached,
shit.
avoiding all forms of segregation and leading the fight against inequality. They even invented the word cosmopolitan, which literally means citizen of the world. When people hear that word now, we think of cities like New York, Toronto, Dubai, and London because of how diverse they are. This was the type of unity and togetherness that the Stoics preached. Even at a time when it wasn't popular, women were allowed to freely learn about Stoicism and become Stoics themselves. So why do so many people adopt Stoicism as a way of life? In a world full of unexpected turns of events, our emotions can tend to get in the way of things. In reality, we don't really get sad because bad things happen to us. We get sad because unexpected bad things happen to us. Rain is a good thing. It helps to water our plants, provides water for livestock, and keeps the temperature cool and humid. But the truth is, when that dark cloud catches you outside without an umbrella, it's never a good experience. So why don't we start crying once it starts to rain? It's because although the situation is bad, we've learned to expect rain. It's something that is unavoidable. We can't control the weather. Although it sucks, the rain passes and the light returns. Stoicism teaches us that, in the same way, we should expect that everything bad that can happen will happen. Picture the worst outcome, and be content knowing it could happen. One of the Stoic exercises is known as voluntary discomfort, an exercise aimed at increasing feelings of gratitude. Sleep on the floor of your kitchen, taking cold showers when you normally take hot ones, eat nothing but potatoes for a few days, things like this. This exercise helps you to understand that no matter how hard it gets, you'll still survive and potentially thrive if your mindset is right. By being able to withstand these uncomfortable situations, we indirectly prepare our mental for future misfortunes. With the current state of the world where advertisements are constantly being shoved down our throats, we're made to believe that if we don't have the next best thing, look a certain way, or make a certain amount of money, that we will never be happy. This message is more important now than ever. We enter the world not knowing much of anything. We grow up being taught things at home, in school, and by observing the world for ourselves. The thing is, a lot of times, all three of these sources of knowledge teach us in different ways. The question is, do we need to internalize all of this knowledge? If we do, we could unknowingly be setting unrealistic expectations for our lives, leaving us ultimately disappointed and unsatisfied in the end. That's no way to live. We should instead focus on improving ourselves, for ourselves. We should do things for ourselves and only for that reason. Attaching any external hope or secondary attachments to the actions we take almost always lead to disappointment. Most of the time, we end up trying to fulfill that emptiness with external things, blowing all your money on a fancy car, a house, or even starting a family. Sometimes we do all of these things for their external value and not their internal value. But Stoicism teaches that if you approach life this way, you place your happiness in the hands of external forces, forces that can always fail. Cars almost always break down. Natural disasters wipe away entire cities. and divorce rates climb higher and higher each year. But even the free things in life come at a cost. The cost of space, both physical and mental. As Seneca once
Yeah, the song isn't even that good either. Their early stuff is way better. 54 in the books. Noise of lightning. Are we raiding anyone? We're probably not going to raid. We might. No raid. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Peace. Really, thank you.